Okay, we will continue the topic, that is the Mughal era in India, right? So we have to continue from here, the paradise to hell, that is the devastating famine. So after the Battle of Plassey, the East India Company secured the right to collect revenue in Bengal, Bihar and Odisha. Robert Clive called Bengal the paradise of the earth because of its immense wealth, fertility and commercial potential which he and the East India Company quickly exploited. Now there were a few devastating famine. Let us see what were they. 1770 to 1772 Bengal famine. Due to drought and natural calamities, there was a widespread crop failure in Bengal. That is, massive crop failure was there. Despite the famine, the British East India Company increased land revenue taxes, worsening the crisis. That is, high taxes by the British. An estimated 10 million people died, about one third of Bengal's population. The British continued collecting tax, showed no significant relief efforts, and prioritized profits over life. After that, one more great famine was there in the year 1876-1878. It affected mostly the Deccan Plateau. Even during famine, grain was exported to Britain, causing local scarcity. The British blamed drought for the famine and they ignored the fact that their economic policies like the taxes, export, no relief camp made it much worse. The British used the idea of a free market to avoid helping starving India. While people starved, Viceroy Lord Lytton hosted a lavish week-long feast for 68,000 British officials in Delhi. This showed how disconnected the British were from Indian suffering. Grain traders were free to hoard and raise prices. Poor people could not afford food. The relief camps were only open after a huge delay, and the camps gave very little food. India sank into deep poverty after 1770 Bengal famine and 1876-78 famine due to colonial exploitation, extractive policies by British. Now, the drain of wealth. Let us see what is the drain of wealth. So, the drain of wealth theory refers to the systematic transfer of the wealth from India to Britain during British colonial rule without adequate economic return. Okay, that is known as drain of wealth. Now, key thinkers have a view regarding this. Let us see. Here, key thinker describe it. Adam Smith, according to him, the Industrial Revolution in Britain, which required much investment, was made possible at least partially by the stolen wealth from the India. William Digby, a British writer, highlighted that millions of people died in famine while India exported food and wealth to Britain. Dadabhai Naoroji, first Indian who formally articulated the drain of wealth theory in his book Poverty and Un-British Rule in India 1901, he compiled the ways and estimated wealth drain out of India. Ramesh Chandra Dutt wrote Economic History of India, argued that high taxes, land revenue policies and lack of investment in Indian industry cause poverty. R.C. Dutt supported Naoroji's views and added that colonial policies destroyed indigenous industries like textile, increasing dependence and poverty. A more estimated by Utsa Patnaik for the period 1765 to 1938 comes to 45 trillion US dollar extracted wealth from India. So Utsa Patnaik that also estimated that almost from the year 1765 to 1938, 45 trillion US dollar extracted wealth from India, right? So these are the key thinkers. They describe how drain of wealth was there in India during the British colonial period. And drain of wealth means taking money from a particular country without any adequate economic return. Okay. Next, changing landscape. Decline of India's indigenous industries. Before the 18th century, India was renowned for its manufacturing capabilities, particularly in textile, cotton, silk, wool, jute, hemp, and coir being the chief ones. Indian cotton textiles, in particular with rich and intricate design, bright colors and textures ranging from ultra-thin muslin to rich embossy fabrics were in high demand in many parts of the world. It means before the decline of this industry, Indian fabrics were very much in demand. Either it is of muslin or of embossed rich fabric. They were in much demand in the other parts of the world. Now, taxation and discriminatory policies were there. Due to this industry's decline. The British imposed heavy taxes on Indian textiles while allowing British-made textile to enter India either duty-free or with minimal taxes. This made Indian goods more expensive and less competitive both domestically and internationally. Control over trade and sea route. The British controlled India's sea route, that is the trade route, which restricted India's access to global market. Indian goods could not be exported freely while British goods flooded Indian market. Collapse of the textile industry. India was once a global leader in the textile production and export. However, due to British policies and competition from British machines made textile, India textile export fell sharply. So, Indian textile is falling very sharply as they can't able to compete with the British machine made textiles. Poverty among skilled artisans. As a result, the loss of livelihood caused by the decline of native industry led skilled artisans and craftsmen to fall into poverty, and their centuries-old traditions and skills were no longer economically viable. Okay, so now their skills are of no value. Apart from it, other industry also declined. Along with textile, other indigenous industries like iron, steel, paper also declined. Fall in India's share of global GDP. Before British colonization, India accounted for a significant portion of world GDP. However, under British rule, this share drastically declined. In less than 2 centuries, India transformed from prosperous economy into one of the poorest nation. Okay, that's why India was known as poor country. Now, Britishers also dismantled the traditional governance structure in India. How and why? Let us see. So, dismantling of traditional governance. The British systematically dismantled long established governance system in India. Indigenous institutions like local kingdoms and village councils were weakened or abolished. Regional kingdom administrative autonomy undermined. So many regional kingdoms had their own administrative systems under traditional rulers. Though initially allowed to function, these systems were gradually brought under British control. Destruction of village council, that is the panchayat. So village level governance such as panchayat played a vital role in local administration and justice. However, the British replaced these bodies with their own administrative officials and centralizing authority. Centralized bureaucracy introduced. A new bureaucratic system was introduced that controlled directly by the colonial government. Decision making shifted from local bodies to British officials, reducing local participation. Replacement of customary laws. The British introduced codified laws, example Indian Penal Code, Civil Procedure Code. These laws replaced traditional community-based legal system rooted in local custom. Apart from it, erosion of centuries-old institution. Long-standing mechanism of governance, justice and conflict resolutions were destroyed. This led to social disruption and alienation of people from the new colonial legal and administrative system. Okay, so in this way, the Britishers dismantled the traditional governance structure. Right. Now we will see transforming Indian education, creating brown Englishmen. So here also in the education field also there were lots of changes has been done by the Britishers. So first is traditional education system before British rule. Earlier what happened? Indigenous institutions like Pathshala, Madrasa, Vihars, that is Buddhist center were widespread. These institutions focus on religious teaching, classical language like Sanskrit, Persian, Arabic, philosophy and traditional science. So earlier traditional education system was there. Now the introduction of Western education. British sought to replace traditional education with Western style learning. They emphasized shifted to English language, Western literature, science, and moral philosophy. So, Maclew Minot on Indian Education 1835. Thomas Babington Maclew argued for educating Indians through English. He rejected traditional Indian knowledge system as useless. He favored European literature and science over Sanskrit and Arabic works. Famous quote from Macaulay Minot is advocated creating a class of Indians who were Indian in blood and color, but English in taste, in opinion, in moral, and in intellectual. Now, what is the goal of the new education policy? To create a loyal administrative class, educated Indians that could serve as low cost clerk and intermediators in the colonial administration. So, this was their motive. Cultural domination, promote English value, language, and world view over Indian tradition. Undermine the traditional authority. Reduce influence of religious leaders and scholars who upheld indigenous system. Social control. Educated elite became culturally aligned with British rulers that weakening resistance. So this was the main motive behind the new education policy of the Britishers. Now, what were the downside and criticism of this education system? Indigenous institutions declined due to neglect and lack of funding. Education became accessible mostly to urban upper caste and elites. It led to alienation of the masses from their own cultural roots and languages. Okay, so these were the things that were happening in the colonial era of the British in education field. Now, reshaping economic structure to serve imperial need. Now, how they have restructured the economic of the India to just serve them, right? Let us see. During the colonial period, the British systematically reshaped India's economic structure to serve their imperial interest. The Indian economy was transformed into a supplier of raw material and a consumer of British manufactured goods. The commercialization of agriculture compelled cultivators to grow cash crops like indigo, cotton, and opium instead of food grains, leading to food shortage and recurring famines. Railways, roads, and ports were developed primarily to transport raw material to ports and import British goods inland. The infrastructure served colonial trade, not local development. The colonial administrative apparatus, military installation, and the lavish lifestyle of British officials in India were all financed by Indian taxation. So, in this way, they have just saved the economic structure to just it should benefit them only, right? Now we will see early resistance movement that is the challenging colonial authority. First is the Sannyasi Fakir rebellion, one of the earliest revolt against British rule in Bengal. It was led by displaced Hindus, sannyasis, and Muslim fakirs. They protested against heavy taxation, loss of land, and British interference in religious and economic life. Sannyasis and fakir attacked British treasuries and tax collectors. They were called bandits by Britishers. This rebellion inspired the Bengal writer Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay novel that is Anandamath 1882. It contained the song Vande Mataram which would inspire Indians during the struggle for freedom in the early 20th century. Next is tribal uprising. It was triggered by British land policies, forest laws and exploitation by moneylenders. Missionaries trying to convert tribals into Christian also play a vital role in tribal uprising. Coal Rebellion, that is 1831-32, it took place in Chota Nagpur, that is the present-day Jharkhand, against land encroachment and revenue officials. The Coal tribes, they were the Mundas and the Orans, they were the primary tribes. They temporarily established their control over significant territory before being defeated by the British forces. The Santhal Rebellion, 1855-56, a large-scale tribal uprising in present-day Jharkhand, Bihar, West Bengal against landlords, moneylenders, and British officials. The Santals declared their own government and vowed to fight to the last drop of blood. However, The British response was brutal. They burned entire villages and killed thousands of Santal, including rebel leader, right? So this is about the tribal uprising. Now we will see the peasant uprising also. They also revolt against the British. So it was caused due to the excessive taxation, forced cultivation and exploitation by zamindars and colonial agents. Indigo Revolt 1859-60. Peasants in Bengal rose against European planters who forced them to grow indigo under harsh conditions. Peasants were poorly paid and trapped in debt slavery. When they refused to grow indigo, they faced imprisonment, torture, and destruction of their property. This uprising was supported by educated Bengalis and the Bengali press and gained significant attention. And finally, the Great Rebellion of 1857, that is, it is also known as the First War of Indian Independence. It involved sepoy, that is, Indian soldier in the British Army, peasants, landlord, and farmer, the former rulers. The main cause was introduction of Enfield rifles. The cartridges of these rifles were rumored to be greased with cow and pig fat, offending both Hindus and Muslims. Other causes were doctrine of lapse by Lord Dalhousie, exploitation by British heavy taxation, interference in Indian customs and traditions. This rebellion was suppressed by 1858 by the British, but it marked the beginning of Indian nationalism. It exposed resentment of Indians against British rule. However, it also led to the end of East India Company rule and India came directly under British crown. Okay, so these were the early days of rebellion against the Britishers. Now, let us go through Rani Lakshmibai of Jhansi, heroic lady. So Rani Lakshmibai of Jhansi was one of the most prominent leader of revolt of 1857. After the British denied her adoptive son right to the throne under the doctrine of lapse, she resisted their control. She is known for her bravery. She led her army with great courage and fought valiantly against British forces. She died on the battlefield, becoming a symbol of resistance and sacrifice in India's freedom struggle. Right? Like her, Begum Hazrat Mahal of Awadh is also very much famous. So Begum Hazrat Mahal was the wife of Nawab Wajid Ali, Shah of Awadh. When the British annexed Awadh and exiled her husband, she took charge of the rebellion in Lucknow during the revolt of 1857. She played a key role in organizing rebel forces and resisting British rule. Despite facing many challenges, she continued to fight for the rights of her people and is remembered as a courageous leader and patriot. Now, the legacy of European colonialism in India, what did they left, right? So the legacy of European colonialism in India, especially under British rule, had a profound and lasting impact on India. It led to the exploitation of India's resources, destruction of traditional industries, and economic dependency on Britain. However, colonialism also introduced modern system of administration, education, railways, and legal reform. English became a linked language and Western ideas of democracy and nationalism slowly spread. At the same time, colonial policies caused widespread poverty, famine, and social division, especially through the divide and rule strategy. India opened to the world. The colonial rule connected India to global trade network. Western education, science, and technologies were introduced. Colonization led to the decline of many traditional art forms, craft, and institutions. Indian custom, languages, and knowledge systems were often undervalued or suppressed. Thousands of ancient Indian manuscripts, sculptures, and paintings were taken to Europe. Priceless treasures, royal jewelry were taken and are still displayed in British and European museums today. India has been actively seeking the reappropriation of the cultural heritage, including manuscript, idols, and jewels. The legacy of European colonialism in India is a mix of deep cultural loss and global exposure. Efforts to reclaim stolen heritage continue reflecting India's growing assertion of its cultural identity. Okay? Though India is actively trying to take back the things that has been taken by the European and they are still working and just it's so that how they are related and they are rooted with their culture, right? So this is about the chapter, the colonial era of India, that is the British, how they came, what did they do. I have just tried to read the chapter and make it as easy and simple for you. I hope this point-wise explanation of each and every topic is going to help you to go through the chapter and just understood the whole chapter. So if you're watching, thank you so much watching until the end, and this much for this video.